Here we go.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Today we have Eric Peterson, who has been with the DCR for 9 years. DCR has been very lucky to have him. He's a forest health specialist and started his career working on ALB with us. So Eric, take it over.
All right, thanks, Felicia. Let me just get into share screen here. Britta, can you stop sharing your screen? It says I can't do it while someone else. All right, perfect. All right, excellent. So just so a lot of you are aware, this presentation, a lot of the material was taken from Felicia's previous presentations. It's just been updated to deal with what we're seeing here in 2021 in our Massachusetts forests. So the Massachusetts Forest Health Program, what we do is we're concerned with the entire state of Massachusetts from Stockbridge to Provincetown. Every single public entity, public forest, you name it, we're responsible for it. We identify new forest health threats, we monitor pest and disease populations, and we help to develop management projects and eradication programs if needed. Some of the current threats that we monitor in our state, one of the newest ones is Beech Leaf Disease. That I'll talk about that in a minute. That came to Connecticut back in 2019. So it's very fresh in Massachusetts. We found it in 2020, and it's spreading quickly. The other one is Lymantria dispar. I'll only say this once. It was previously known as gypsy moth, but moving forward, we call it Lymantria. We have emerald ash borer here in Massachusetts. It's widespread. It's in over 200 towns spread throughout the Commonwealth. Southern pine beetle. It's not really a major problem that we're dealing with here, but it is on our radar. Our hemlocks are under duress from different pests and pathogens. Eastern white pine, needle casts and diseases. Overall, their decline in general. We also deal with, as Felicia said, Asian longhorned beetle. Another new threat that we have starting this year is the spotted lanternfly. And future threats on our radar is just oak wilt. So the monitoring aspect, we have many survey and trapping methods. These are used to identify invasive species. There are a couple different methods that we can use. The yellow trap there is a water trap. We also have purple sticky traps that we used to use for emerald ash borer. Those are contact traps. And then we also use things like plant volatiles, insect pheromones, things like that to draw in the invasives. So every year we're required by the U.S. Forest Service to perform an aerial survey. This goes back decades. And we have some data here for the last couple of years that I'll just share with you. Going back to 2017, that was one of our, excuse me, just one moment. Let me just shut this off. Going back to 2017, we had a major outbreak of gypsy moth, Lymantria here in Massachusetts, where over 900,000 acres of our forests, mostly oak trees, were defoliated. And then we also dealt with over 8,500 acres of eastern white pine beetle disease. But you can see here, according to this map, there's a whole range of different pests and pathogens that we deal with here in Massachusetts. So again, this is 2017, where Lymantria was the major factor. And then moving into 2018, we had far less Lymantria. It wasn't as much of a problem. Sorry about that. It wasn't as much of a problem, but it was definitely still causing defoliation, and that eventually led to over 23,000 acres of oak mortality. Again, oak being the major host for Lymantria. And then in 2019, it decreased all the way down to 10,000 acres of Lymantria defoliation, but the oak mortality had really set in by then. When you have consecutive years of defoliation by a pest, that feeds as voraciously as Lymantria does. Back-to-back seasons will eventually lead to mortality, and that's what we started seeing in a lot of our oak trees. So private businesses, arborists are going to be busy for a number of years trying to get some of these trees down. And then also starting in 2019, we started to see the effects of emerald ash borer. We started getting the ash mortality, and it became noticeable. You can see the effects of it, but the mortality in 2019 really started to present itself. 2020 was a very strange year. We did not get to fly that year due to COVID-19 restrictions. We'd fly in a little tiny airplane with just 2 people in it allowed to fit. So that was a no-go with COVID-19 going on. So these are just some of the highlights that we found through our survey efforts on the ground. We had some white ash dieback, again, from the emerald ash borer, 4,600 acres of oak defoliation caused by fall cankerworm. Those were out on the islands. Lymantria, we weren't seeing as much in 2020. Again, we couldn't fly, so the effects are a lot easier to see from the air regarding that one. Foliage discoloration on red pines due to red pine scale and diplodia. And lastly is the crown discoloration in eastern white pine due to the needle casts and the white pine needle diseases. And this is fresh off the press. We just published this. This is our 2021 aerial survey results. We had 80,000 acres of forest damage statewide, with about 1,100 of that being attributed to Lymantria. And that is mostly over here in the West in the Berkshires. And we also had 50,000 acres discolored by different conifer needle casts, with the majority of that being out on the Cape with our pitch pines and a pitch pine needle cast. So the first disease I'll talk about is Beech Leaf Disease. Again, this is a fairly new phenomenon to reach Massachusetts. It was first detected in Connecticut in 2019, and it presents itself in the buds first, and then the foliage, when it flushes out, you see this banding, which means it must have overwintered there. So they think it was here from at least 2018, but it was first detected in 2019 in Connecticut. Here in Massachusetts, it's found on American beech, European beech, and oriental or copper beeches. The early symptoms that we see in the field are the dark banding between the lateral veins. And you can see that in the top picture here. We're not looking at the lighter side of the foliage, which is sometimes what you see with mite damage or aphid damage. What we're looking for is this heavy dark green banding between the veins. And then in the later stages, the bands darken, the leaves become real thick and leathery almost, they curl up, they're shriveled, and it leads to early onset abscission or leaf drop. So you have to get to this a little bit earlier in the season, or you're picking leaves up off the ground and you can't really see the effects as readily. But it also leads to aborted bud development. So some buds just won't even flush out into foliage, and it leads to a reduced leaf production in the canopy. So we get a loss of canopy cover, higher transparency, more sunlight hitting the ground, but the trees start to not do too hot. So it was first detected in Massachusetts in 2020. So the following year after Connecticut had kind of tipped us all off to it. And again, these are the symptoms we were looking at. They present themselves very easily. If you're underneath the canopy staring straight up on a sunny day, you can't miss it. It looks very out of the ordinary. So again, these leaves on the right are starting to curl. Soon a lot of these will drop off prematurely. So Morton Park was in Plymouth, was the first location. Again, that was in 2020, just last year. And since then, we found it in 6 different counties. Essex up in the north, Middlesex, Worcester County in the center of Massachusetts, Norfolk County south of Boston, and then Bristol and Plymouth near Rhode Island, and then Plymouth County. I think we're all familiar with Plymouth County. So again, this is a slide representing some of that canopy cover loss. The leaves are starting to drop off early. You're seeing these holes in the canopy, and just the overall vigor of the tree is starting to decline. So they're fairly certain that Beech leaf disease is caused by a nematode, Little Incus crenata, and it was first introduced in the Ohio area, Pennsylvania, Lake Erie. And we work with the Cleveland Metro Parks organization. They were kind of at the forefront of beech leaf disease discovery. So we follow a lot of their survey methodologies. So we have similar data sets that we can compare to what they're seeing out in the field. And what's interesting about beech leaf disease here in Massachusetts is we not only find it right on the road, right on a trail system, but we're talking miles out into the woods. You can find a tree that's infested with beech leaf disease. So sadly, we're a little bit behind on the science. We don't know exactly how beech leaf disease spreads quite yet. There are a lot of theories. Some people think the nematodes are catching a ride on birds. They think that they might be in the vascular system. There are a lot of theories out there, but we just don't know quite yet how it spreads, which makes offering homeowners who have beech leaf disease, it makes offering them advice on how to deal with it very difficult, and it's quite frustrating. So hopefully we can catch up on that sometime soon and get out in front of this before it causes major devastation. A lot of our beech cohort resides in Western Massachusetts. You see it is loaded in the Berkshires. So we haven't found it there yet, thankfully, but we don't know. Fingers crossed. Other insects and diseases on beech trees here in Massachusetts, we have beech bark disease, which is caused by a fungus on the back of the woolly beech scale. There are currently no controls for the fungus, but what you can do to deal with the scale is spray horticultural oils. And what that does is generally suffocates them, and those die off potentially before the fungus can go into their feeding sites. We also have woolly adelgids, aphids, mites, etc. So this is kind of what I was talking about. This top left photo here, you're looking at this lighter damage, and that was caused by aphids and mites. Same with this picture down on the left with the browning. Beech leaf disease looks very different from that. It looks nothing like that. With beech leaf disease, again, we're looking for that dark banding as opposed to the lighter colorations. So moving on to Lymantria. Massive defoliation again this year in Berkshire County. It was very, very heavy feeding in Berkshire County. Here's a slide showing its life cycle. We have the adult male and female. They lay their egg masses, which are these cottony beige or kind of orange sometimes if they're real lively and viable. And those will mature into first instar caterpillars, which are almost invisible. They're super tiny little black speck caterpillars. And as those larvae go through their instar stages, they turn into what we all know with the 6 blue dots and the 6 red dots on their back. And then those larvae will pupate in these pupal casings on the tree. And you can actually see those during really heavy years of defoliation. We have that over here on the left. These are all pupal casings. So they kind of got together and all pupated like in a small cluster. And they leave their caterpillar, their hairs behind, their pupal casings behind. It's a real hot mess. It's ugly, it's hideous to look at. And then you're left behind as you overwinter with these egg masses. So here what you'll see, again, big hairy mess, absolutely disgusting. And so going back to the last slide, we have these orange egg masses. These are viable. These look happy, they're healthy. But then when you get to this site, a lot of these have been parasitized. So they're starting to lose that vibrant, it's kind of tough to call beige a vibrant color, but that orange or vibrant beige color, and they start to kind of turn white. They get these speckles from the parasitoids' entrance and exit holes. So some of these might not be viable, but they can lay so many eggs inside these egg masses that it doesn't take all of them to be viable for any of them to be dangerous. So moving over to the chart on the right, we have the Lymantria defoliation that we've seen throughout the years, hitting its peak in 2017. And then again, that pairs with the oak mortality that we're seeing 2 years after that. So in 2016, 2017, and 2018, we had real heavy feeding. The oaks are trying to flush out new growth, secondary growth in that same season. It stresses them out, it depletes their starch reserves. And what we start to see is the oak mortality in the following years. So again, oak mortality, and it's a combination of factors. Not only do you have the defoliation, but now you're dealing with heavy drought stress, multiple years of defoliation. They could be getting too much water. As we deal with climate change, our weather patterns are changing. We're getting flushed with 4 inches of rain and then getting no rain at all. So it's just putting added stress on the trees, and that leads to the mortality events. Again, here's some photos. Some of these trees look like they're trying to flush out a secondary round of growth, but a lot of them are just standing dead. And again, these will have to be dealt with because these are hazards now. So whenever you have a target, you have a hazard, you can have a hazard, and it looks like a walking path here. So if this is on state property, these all would need to be removed. And then you deal with things like secondary invaders. Up top here, we have the two-line chestnut borer. And once the trees are already weakened and dealing with the stresses of Lymantria, they'll move in and basically finish off the job. And you also have fungal pathogens here in the middle that help assist killing off the trees. So again, this is a picture of some of the defoliation you can see. I don't know if you can all see my cursor, but you can see these patches out on the islands. This is the Quabbin. This is out on the peninsulas. You can see all this defoliation on this peninsula here, where you're losing that lush green growth over here on the right, and then up here near the cloud cover. Just very widespread damage. So every year, what we do is we do an egg mass survey. We have I think over 300 spots that we investigate, and these are the spots we investigated in 2020. And you can see historically, we like to hit this southern part of Worcester County and then heading west over into Hampden and Hampshire County. And then we had a lot of damage in the previous seasons up in Essex County. But our survey won't look anything like this. This year, we'll probably turn our focus over to the Berkshires, and that will inform us. And basically, we get an idea of what we're going to be dealing with next year, and we can convey that to the public. We do have some native defoliator species here in Massachusetts, like the eastern tent caterpillar, the forest tent caterpillar, and then fall cankerworm. Fall cankerworm are a type of looper or an inchworm. So they curl their back up when they move, and then they thrust themselves forward. Eastern tent caterpillar has that stripe down its back, and the forest tent caterpillar, they call those keyholes on its back, and that's one way that you can identify them. But these are all native defoliators. Generally, they can be cyclical. We don't really tend to worry about them too much. A lot of what they cause is aesthetic damage. So maybe a homeowner doesn't want them on their tree because they form these ugly webs when they congregate and they eat. But for us in forest health, they're not a major pest or issue. Fall cankerworm is kind of one exception. Out on Martha's Vineyard, they get massive defoliation events in the scrub oak. But again, statewide, fall cankerworm hasn't been a major problem for a long time. Here, there's another picture of Martha's Vineyard, and you can see the defoliation in the center of the picture there, surrounded by all the lush growth. So occasionally there are outbreaks. It's always in areas that are dominated by oak, but the outbreaks are short-lived. Something interesting I came across is that North Carolina has had an outbreak which lasted over 20 years, first coming up or popping up in 1987. So in other parts of the US, maybe this is a major issue, but generally speaking, it's not for us here in Massachusetts. White satin moth was introduced in the 1920s. A couple of hosts like poplar, cottonwood, aspen, and willow. Again, not a major pest here in Massachusetts, but one of the reasons it can be considered a pest is that it targets early successional trees. So if you're on the edge of construction or a meadow or anything where the trees are going through that successional plan from a meadow to a forest, these are the trees you find. You find aspens, poplar, cottonwood, stuff like that. And if the white satin moth were to wipe those out, then it's a lot harder to transition over to forest or hardwood forest at that point. But again, not a major pest here. We had an outbreak, I think, last year or 2 years ago in Beartown State Park. For those of you unfamiliar, that's over in Monterey, Massachusetts, out towards Berkshire County. And then we also have another native, the fall webworm. I think most of us have seen this in our lifetime. They tend to attack birch, cherry, crabapple. Mostly, again, it's an aesthetic pest. It doesn't really cause a ton of damage. It's just very unsightly. It's another one of those trees that we get phone calls from homeowners for. They just don't like the webs being all over their trees, but they tend to congregate out at the ends of the branches, which is similar to another pest we might cover later, the brown-tailed moth. Which takes us to emerald ash borer, Agrillus planopennis. It's native to Asia. It was introduced to the United States in the 1990s, first detected in Michigan in 2002, and it's a threat to all native ash species. So we have white ash, green ash, black ash here in Massachusetts, with black ash being the least common, but it affects all of those. Emerald ash borer goes through holometabolous metamorphosis or complete metamorphosis, so this is similar to some of the other pests that we've seen so far, where the adults lay their eggs, the eggs hatch into larvae, they go through a certain number of instar stages, and then they pupate, and once they're done pupating, they exit the hardwood trees as in their adult form, and they go on to repeat the cycle. So some ways to identify emerald ash borer. One is the color of the elytra, or these hard covers over their flying wings. And those are, of course, normally a nice shiny emerald color, dark green, but they can be anything from kind of orangey brown to red, copper, really any color. The key indicator is if you were to spread those elytra apart, his abdomen is always this coppery red color. And that is unique amongst the flat-headed borers to emerald ash borer. So again, I just mentioned emerald ash borer is a flat-headed borer, where if you were to look straight on at its exit hole, it makes a D shape as opposed to a circle or an O shape. And that's because it has one side of its head is flat. It's considered a jewel beetle or a metallic wood boring beetle. So as far as EAB detections go, I'm responsible for updating this map. I don't think it's been updated. Yeah, our last one is from January of this year. So we've added freshly on top of this map, I'd say another 20 towns. So we're up over 200 communities across 11 counties here in Massachusetts. And the reason you don't see a ton of it out on the Cape is, and then Plymouth and Bristol really is our ash resource kind of runs out as you come south out of Norfolk County. And from what I've seen, Tupelo tends to kind of take over down in this area. But again, over 200 communities infested. We're not surprised at all to roll up on a community and have a new find or a new detection. It's rapidly expanding. Some through human assisted movement, it flies well on its own, and they reproduce readily. So, but you can see the map is color coded here with the greener, darker shades being the older infestation finds. So our first detection was out here in Dalton, Massachusetts in 2012. Here. And it's spread quite readily, like I said. So the USDA and their Animal Plant Health Inspection Services, or APHIS, ended the emerald ash borer domestic quarantine regulations on January 14th of this year. So, and that's a federal regulation. So you weren't allowed to move it federally outside of these boundaries. I'm not sure if we still have the Massachusetts regulation still in effect. I believe we do. I know some of the surrounding states have it in effect. So you can't bring firewood from Massachusetts into Connecticut, into Rhode Island, into the surrounding states. Again, that's that human assisted movement that we try to avoid. That's why a lot of campgrounds institute that you have to buy your firewood on site. Some will let you even buy it in town, but generally you want to burn where you buy it or where you find it. You don't want to be moving wood around. So some of the monitoring methods that we've used in the past, on the left here, we have the purple sticky trap. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a contact trap. In the middle, we have, I think that's a Lundgren, a funnel trap, and that has plant volatiles and pheromones. the bug is attracted to it. Sometimes we'll dab them up with a chemical called fluon, which is like a slip and slide, and they slide down into that collection cup at the bottom, and we're able to detect whether or not emerald ash borer is in the area. Another thing we do, or used to do, is we would girdle an ash tree. And then what that does is the ash tree becomes under duress and it sends out plant volatiles, and that attracts emerald ash borers and other predatory insects to the tree. Then we, fell that tree. And what you see down here in the bottom picture on the right are our draw knives. And what we're trying to do is peel back the bark and get to that cambium layer where the larva is feeding, their larval feeding galleries. They're S-shaped. I probably have a picture of that in a minute, but basically that was another way to detect if you have emerald ash borer in the area or not. And we were finding it in areas that we didn't expect in the beginning, but again, now it's pretty much everywhere. So how to identify infested trees? Over on the left, we have those D-shaped exit holes I was talking about. Again, because this is a flathead borer. There are native ash borers that have round heads. They're round-headed borers, so their exit holes look slightly different. And those are about the size of a pinky nail. If you were to hold your pinky up, that's how tiny those. They're maybe half a pinky nail. They're super small. They're hard to see unless there are a lot of them. And then you have a size reference with this penny for the emerald ash borer. Again, very tiny. Over here on the right, what you can see is the canopy. This is one of the first things to go in an ash tree that's affected by emerald ash borer. The canopy loses its foliage. Then what it'll start doing is putting out water sprouts. That's this middle picture here, or epicormic shoots, as we call them. And it's not normal to see that on a tree. Trees grow south to north, they grow up, and they put out branches as they get taller and taller. They don't hit the reset button and throw out branches down low unless they're under a lot of stress. And what that is them trying to put out a flush of new growth in order to photosynthesize and kind of regain some of that energy back. But basically, a lot of times it's a last ditch effort for a tree to increase its starch reserves or its energy. So over on the left here, we have what we call blonding. And what that is birds, mostly woodpeckers, going after emerald ash borer larvae that's in the tree. And what they're doing is they're ripping off pieces of bark, trying to physically get to that larva underneath the bark. So this picture right here would have been fresh that year. It's got this nice fresh lumber color to it. Eventually that'll kind of fade off, as you can see in the water sprout picture, to this kind of gray color. But that is a classic telltale sign that you have emerald ash borer in your trees. And then here in the second picture, what we have is the larval feeding galleries. And these are in an S-shaped feeding gallery. They start off really small and they get fatter and fatter and filled with what we call frass. That's this, it's basically insect poop or wood pulp. So they start off small and skinny. As they progressively get bigger, the tunnels get bigger, and they're always in this serpentine S shape. That's another telltale sign. A lot of other ash borers have different tunneling methodologies, symbols. However, the way that it looks is just very different. This is unique to emerald ash borer. So again, red-headed ash borer is one of those borers I'm talking about. You can see its feeding gallery here it looks nothing like the serpentine gallery we were just looking at. They're a lot deeper into the wood because red-headed ash borer is a round-headed borer, and they're packed with a lot more frass as it's feeding through the cambium layer. So again, this is the exit hole. You can see it's round. It doesn't quite look like the D-shaped exit holes we were looking at of the flat-headed borers. So little slight variances, slight differences that tip us off. Red-headed ash borer is native. It's not really a huge problem here. So if we see this, we can move on. Again, these are those feeding galleries from emerald ash borer, serpentine, back and forth, starting off small, getting larger, and they're not nearly as deep as the red-headed ash borer. So we do have a biocontrol program that we institute. Basically what we're doing is we're releasing parasitoids or predatory wasps. They're not wasps like you think. They're not yellow jackets. They don't sting. They're harmless. They're really tiny. They're about 1/8 of an inch. And What they do is they go after the larval phase and the egg phase. What we have here is a bolt that we attach to the tree. And inside of that is, I believe, Tetrasticus planopenisi. And those will emerge as adults and then start attacking the larval phase of emerald ash borer. What we have up top is our ubinator, or the Ubius agrilli. And these are in egg form. They're going to hatch out and then go after EAB eggs. And then, I don't know if you guys can see. If I move this. So then down here on the bottom right, we have Spathius gallinae, and those are already adults. We get those as adults in cups, mostly females, couple males, and those will go out and be parasitoids of the larva. And that's Felicia's picture of the ubinator. So this is the only one that doesn't look natural. When we go out, we nail the bolts to the tree. The cups come with us when all the adults leave. But if you ever come across these medicine canisters or pill jars in the woods, it's most likely us. It's nothing to worry about, but it is super strange to see in the woods. But we do go back to pick them up at the end of the season. We pick up our trash. All right, pesticide treatment options. There's an insecticide book put out there. It's a collaboration between a bunch of colleges. It basically tells you everything you need to know. You can look this up online. When we treat trees, we do a direct injection with emamectin benzoate, but there are a lot of different systemic pesticides that you could choose if you wanted to treat for emerald ash borer. The one caveat with emerald ash borer is it's voracious, it moves fast, it propagates quickly. So if you're already seeing signs of emerald ash borer in your tree, it could even potentially be too late. So you need to be proactive with your treatments as opposed to reactive. If you're reactive, it might be too late, and then you're just pumping money into a dead tree. So just a word of caution. So ash decline and lookalike damage. Again, there are other native pests and wood borers that we deal with here in Massachusetts. And then we also deal with armillaria. Oftentimes this is in dying or dead wood and wet areas. If we have prolonged periods of heavy moisture, heavy rainfall, armillaria can move in. Not really a lookalike, but it helps. It assists in ash decline here in Mass. So southern pine beetle. We don't have a population of southern pine beetle here in Massachusetts. They attack pitch pine, so where we would predominantly be worried about it would be on the islands or out in Cape Cod. But as I said, we don't have a population yet, which is fantastic, but we have found them in traps in the past in low levels. But again, no infested trees yet. As its name implies, it's a southern pine beetle, but its range is expanding northward. It is native, but it's native to the southern US. So as temperatures or climate change, as temperatures increase with climate change issues, we could potentially see it here in Massachusetts sooner rather than later. Pitch pine is the preferred host. Again, a lot of that we see out in Cape Cod and the islands. And what you're looking for are these little popcorn, they're called pitch tubes. And the way that southern pine beetle works is they have multiple per year. And what they'll do is the sentinel will basically go out and find a stressed out pitch pine, and he sends out the pheromones calling all his buddy to that tree. And because they have multiple generations in a year, they can aggregate in high densities and kill that tree off super quick. The tree's response is to push the pitch or the pine tar or resin tubes out. And basically what that does is it suffocates the beetles. But if they're able to overcome that, mostly due to their numbers, that's when the tree would succumb. So pitch pine, again, out on the Cape and the islands, it grows where other trees can't. It likes really crappy soil, acidic, sandy, low nutrients. It's a pioneer species. It basically serves as a placeholder for oak and other pines to move in eventually. One way to tell a pitch pine, they have what we call tree beards. They grow these little tufts of branches right off the main stem. Not a lot of other trees grow like that. It almost looks like when a thorned locust puts out those thorns on its bole or its trunk. So this is for size comparison. You can see how tiny the beetle actually is and how tiny its entrance and exit holes are. And again, you can see kind of the pitch tubes, the tree's response to being under attack. So because they aggregate and they reproduce, they have multiple generations per year, they're able to kill stands of trees relatively quickly. Over on the right here, you can see multiple years of mortality, with the center being completely dead, the outer ring dying slowly, and then them moving on to even further out in a radius around that center point. So one way that we deal with that in our outbreak response is to kind of set up a fire break. So what they would do is cut down a ring of healthy trees around the trees that are being attacked. And what that hopefully does is, again, creates that fire break where the beetles hopefully won't make that jump out to the healthy trees, and the population will die off inside while we can, spend time to deal with it. So again, the impact of climate change, as our temperatures start getting warmer and warmer later and later into the season. I think as we're seeing even this October, average temperature is like 70 degrees. Those warming temperatures and longer growing seasons are going to allow for an increase in not only the number of generations, but also the risk of the outbreak event occurring in the first place. And then, not to get into climate change too much, but on the left, you can kind of see where we're headed with the different models that have been suggested. So southern pine beetle trapping, it's very similar to emerald ash borer. You have these funnel traps with, I think, 10 or 12 funnels. You spray them with fluon. That's that slip and slide substance. They fly into that. They sink down into that collection cup, and we're able to go around bi-weekly and check the cups for any catches that we have. And what draws the southern pine beetle in is we have, again, plant volatiles and just chemical compounds like pheromones and stuff to send out the signal to draw them in. And these are some of our trap finds. You see most of them concentrated down in the Cape and the islands. So again, preparing for an eventual outbreak, we set those traps up. We weren't able to do it this year because of COVID supply issues, but generally speaking, every year we set out traps on the islands and in Cape Cod, and we go out and check those bi-weekly. So other native bark beetles that we have here are the ips and the black turpentine beetle. And what's interesting is all of their damage looks slightly different, and they tend to kind of attack different parts of the tree. So southern pine beetle, we generally find attacking like 10 to 15 feet up in the tree, where ips will kind of attack the top of the tree. The black turpentine beetle will attack the base of the tree. So that really helps in identification, as well as the size of the beetle warrants a different response from the pitch pine. So some of the pitch tubes, like for the black turpentine beetle, which is larger, the pitch tubes are going to be a lot larger. Those will tend to drip down the tree, and it doesn't have that unique popcorn appearance that southern pine beetle gets. So moving on to hemlock, personally, one of my favorite trees we have here in Massachusetts. Hemlock forests are absolutely stunning. If you get a chance to go out and check any of the waterfalls here in Massachusetts, I highly suggest it. They basically block out all sunshine to the forest floor, so it's easy walking. There's nothing in your way. They provide great shade, keep the water systems cool. All right, so one of our biggest pests we have here in Massachusetts is the hemlock woolly adelgid. This is another pest that is a lot more severe down in the south, but we do have it up here in Massachusetts. So what you're seeing here, this is some adelgids with their cottony wool that they put on, and inside of that are their eggs. Down here we have some adelgids that haven't broken their estivation yet. And what estivation is like a summer hibernation. So they actually go dormant all summer, and right around this time of the year, late October, early November, they'll start putting that cotton on and they'll become active and start feeding at the base of the needles. So you'll never really find a Adelgid up on the needles itself. They park themselves right at the base of the needle and they suck on the juices from the branch or the stem. So over on the right, these have all broken estivation and put on their wool. And this is very easy to see. So when they're in this form, you would need a magnifying lens to see them generally. But once they put on that wool, they're pretty obvious. So again, the DCR here in Massachusetts, we have a biocontrol program for this. We release 2 different beetles that predate hemlock woolly adelgids. That is the Sassagicymnus tsugae and Laricobius nigrinus. And to release those, we go out where we know there are adelgid populations, and you basically paint them on the tree, as you can see my boss here doing on the right. So another pest we have here in Massachusetts is the elongate hemlock scale. And neither the adelgid nor the scale is too much of a problem. But what happens is this is considered a really heavy infestation on this hemlock branch right here. And when you pair that with the adelgid, that's when we start seeing really heavy mortality events. Currently, we're trying to treat these across the state at some of our state parks. We have 12 state forests that we treat in. We sprayed a basal bark spray of dinotefuran. It's a systemic chemical. And what we believe we're seeing, we're studying it. So we have an ongoing study right now. And what we think we're seeing is that it handles the adelgid, but the scale is a little bit more resilient to it. But as long as we can knock one of them back, the hemlocks kind of stand a better chance of thwarting off mortality. But they're very basic creatures. These are the scales over here. Very basic. They just suck all the juices out of the sap out of the hemlock needles. So again, the treatments that we do, it's a dinotefuran treatment. We believe it's more effective against the adelgid, less effective against the scale. In 2020, we treated the Blue Hills State Reservation, Mount Tom, Hemlock Gorge, and Wachusett. This year in 2021, we treated Bashbish Falls, Chester Blandford State Forest, and Middlesex Fells Reservation over in Middlesex County. Another pest that we have, we don't generally see massive outbreaks of hemlock looper, although this year we did. We found a big infestation up in the Royalston area. And what's kind of weird is they feed on the needles. They're considered a wasteful feeder. So you can see they take a couple nibbles and then they move on. But what that causes is early abscission. These needles will fall off the tree. And what's left behind is just kind of that ghostly skeleton of all the really fine twigs. And it just has a real eerie look to it. Like the tree, you know, it should have those needles there, but they're just not there. It's kind of neat. But again, not a major forest pest here in Massachusetts. We don't see too much of it. They are seeing it. It's not a surprise that we saw it this year because southern New Hampshire is reporting a heavy hemlock looper infestation, but again, not seeing too much of that down here in Mass. And then we have different fungal diseases. We undergo periodic outbreaks of fungal pathogens. Here we have Fibrella and Staurococcus, needle blight and a tip blight. Again, generally not deadly. We definitely see it on the hemlocks, but not too much of an issue. And with our conifers here in Massachusetts, it's not a surprise, again, with the moisture regimes that we see, to have beetle casts or blights in some of our conifers. And then again, so if these hemlocks are getting wet and they're so dense, the sun's not getting through, they don't dry off, it's, sometimes it's easier for fungal pathogens to get in and spread. Which leads us to another conifer. We saw widespread eastern white pine decline this year, or white pine needle disease, white pine needle cast. They all kind of go by the same name. It's the overall decline in tree health for white pine, but it's caused by multiple native fungal pathogens. So a lot of these have been around, and a lot of it is the moisture regimes that are just bringing it to the forefront of our attention and to the decline of the white pine's overall health. So the fungal needle infections are caused by, again, native fungal pathogens. The majority of the defoliation is caused by a needle blight, Mechanosticta acicula. I don't get to say that too often, but so the ways that you see this in the tree are you see a lot of needle loss. The trees don't look as robust as they could. You can kind of see that in this middle picture here. You also see the yellowing of the needles, and this won't be as affected on this year's growth. It's mostly on like last year's growth because it takes a year for the fungal bodies to present themselves. And then you'll see things like this banding on an individual needle, and then some of the black dots from the fungal fruiting bodies. Generally, you got to get real close to see that. What we see are the yellowing of the needles and early needle loss. Caliciopsis is another canker that we've been dealing with. It's a stem canker caused by a native fungal pathogen, Caliciopsis pinea. It's common in younger white pines and regeneration stands. So in areas that have been clear cut or just cleared out in general, and you get that flush of early successional growth, those younger white pines are more susceptible. And we believe it's caused by the eastern white pine bast scale. They're commonly found together, the scale and the cankers. So they believe that the fungal pathogen resides on its body, on its back, and when it feeds and creates holes in the tree, that serves as a vector for the pathogens to move in. So again, the fungal pathogen moves into the feeding sites. The cankers form in between the branch formations. And one of the key indicators that you could tell you have Caliciopsis in this first picture are these little, they're called stylets. Those are the fruiting bodies of the fungus there. And they stick straight out. They look almost like eyelashes. And that's how you can sometimes tell that you may have an infestation. The University of Maine puts out a great guidebook if you're ever interested in finding out anything about white pines and managing them and their health. It's a great field guide. These are most of the common diseases, pest pathogens that we see. It's easy to get. You can get it online. Again, very useful to have out in the field. So Asian longhorn beetle, we've had that here in Worcester County for a number of years now. It goes through the complete metamorphosis, like we've talked about, that holometabolous life cycle. It has a lot of lookalikes here in Massachusetts. The white spotted pine sawyer being the #1 phone call that we get. The major difference where the Asian longhorn beetle has this shiny, glossy coat and no white spot right here on the back of it. What it's called the scutellum. It's kind of like the nape of its neck. The white spotted pine sawyer has a very dull, mottled, almost brown look, and it always has that white spot on the scutellum, or again, between the elytra at kind of the bottom of the neck there. So ALB damage, Asian longhorn beetle is a round-headed wood borer, so it causes round exit holes. They're perfectly round, about the size of a dime. And what's kind of cool is you can do a pencil test, and they chew their exit holes perpendicular to the grain of the wood. So the pencil will always stick out of that hole at a perfect right angle. So that's one way to tell. There are some other pests that have exit holes that go at angles, but that's not what we're looking for. So over on the right, you can see some exit holes and a whole bunch of egg sites. They use their mandibles or their mouth parts to chew those. We call them oviposition pits. That's where they lay their eggs. So down here on the bottom left, you can see this is an old egg site on the left. You can kind of see the mandible marks. They're starting to fade, but you get that cross-shaped crack in the middle of it. That's part of the healing process. And you can juxtapose that with the egg site to the right of it, which is very fresh. It's this year. It's got that fresh orange cambium layer. It's chewed wood. You can see the mandible marks, and you can actually even see the oviposition pit in the middle, which is just slightly deeper than the rest of the pit. And then again, I think this pile over here might have been from someone over in Shrewsbury collecting heavily infested wood, causes an entire neighborhood to get lit up with an infestation. So the cooperative eradication program is a cooperative effort between the United States Department of Agriculture, which is federal, and the Department of Conservation and Recreation, which is statewide, Massachusetts. That's who I work for. To the right, we have a map of the regulated area. You can see it takes up multiple towns: Worcester, West Boylston, Boylston, Shrewsbury, and then we have parts of Holden and parts of Auburn down here in the south. So I believe they're up to 110 square miles of regulated area. So every host tree within this 110 square miles has or will be surveyed at some point. It's a very labor-intensive effort. When you're looking at infested trees that we found by year, 2008 is when we were first tipped off to the infestation by a local Worcester resident, Donna Massey. Look her up. She's an awesome character. It's a lot of fun. But again, so in 2009, the infested trees peaked. We cut a whole bunch of them out of the heart area in northern Worcester. And from there, we were finding less and less every year. And now we're getting on towards the end. We're getting close to eradication, we believe. But according to the USDA's guidelines, you have to have clean surveys in order to declare that it's completely eradicated. So you kind of need to, even though we're not finding anything anymore, that's the point. You got to stay out there. You got to keep looking in order to officially declare something eradicated. So we also have an ALB trapping program. Again, this is similar to some of the other traps. It's not quite a funnel trap, but it operates in somewhat a similar way. You have in the middle here, plant volatiles, chemical compounds that draw the beetles in. You spray the trap down with fluon. That's again the slip and slide substance, and the beetles will fall down into the collection jar. You go out every week or 2 weeks and you check out the jar to see what you have. We get a lot of bycatch, but occasionally we find beetles in there. And there are different methodologies to this. Sometimes we set up where we think we're going to find them inside the zone. And we've also used the traps in the past outside of the regulated area to make sure we haven't missed anything. This is the dashboard I believe Felicia has set up. It tells you kind of where the traps have been placed, what's going on with their efforts, how many have been checked, how many have been changed, what kind of things they're catching, the tree species utilized, all sorts of stuff. Super creative. Just one look, you can get the overall view of what's going on with the trapping program. It's pretty great. So potential future threats. These are going to be things that we've seen in the past. Human introduced species like Lymantria. That was a guy in Massachusetts thinking it was a silkworm and he could get rich and famous. It wasn't. It was a very destructive pest. So human introduced species are one of the heavy hitters for damage that we see, not only here in Massachusetts, but really anywhere. It's the world is getting smaller. We're becoming more connected. So we need to be careful about what we're bringing to other places with us. We talked about climate change here a lot. Those hotter temperatures are moving north. It's extending not only growing seasons, but breeding seasons for some of these pests. They can have multiple generations per year. We see changes in land use, clearing land, regenerating land. It all brings new threats to our forests. And the DCR Forest Health Program works to identify any immediate or imminent potential threats. The newest pest that we have is the spotted lanternfly. It was just recently found a few months ago in Fitchburg. It was only 2 trees, 2 ailanthus trees. They've surveyed the entire area. We've sprayed the trees. They'll be coming down this winter. So we believe we have this one in check. But again, with human assistance, a lot of this stuff comes in on shipping materials because they will lay their eggs on virtually any smooth surface. Here we have a massive infestation over in Pennsylvania. You can see that it's spreading. They're considered a leaf hopper, so they don't fly particularly well, but they can. And they congregate in massive numbers. And one of the biggest reasons they're such a pest is because they go after our grapes, our hops, and our orchards. So if you like alcohol, that's a big problem. Here's some of those egg masses we were talking about on an ailanthus tree. They kind of blend in. So these are the individual egg cases, and then the spotted lanternfly will cover that up with the, not a cottony mass, but just some sort of protective layer. These eggs over on the bottom have already hatched. What you're seeing here is the honeydew on these oak leaves here. So when they pierce the trees and feed on them, after they move on, the tree doesn't stop weeping or leaking the sap. And what that does is it falls down and creates what we call honeydew, and that can eventually turn into sooty mold and all sorts of other pests and problems. I don't think this video is going to work, but you can basically see and hear the honeydew falling from the tree because they gather in such massive numbers that if you were to stand under the tree, it's like physically raining on you. And then a future threat is oak wilt. It's a vascular fungal pathogen. It can infect all native oak species. It goes after red oak a lot faster and a lot harder than it does white oak, but both are susceptible. A tree infected with oak wilt can die in as little as 6 weeks. So what you're looking for on your oak trees is the browning of the leaf margins. So it starts out at the tips and then moves its way in. You can see that in these two photos over on the right. That's what oak wilt looks like. Kind of looks like anthracnose sometimes too. They're easy to mix up, but when we see stuff like this, we send it off to the labs over at UMass and they help us to identify it. Again, leaf scorch kind of looks similar. Anthracnose, not as much, but we're seeing the browning out on the margins. Slightly different, but a little similar. All right, that is all I got for you guys today.
Thank you, Eric. That was a great presentation.
Thanks. I tried to race at the end. I don't know what we're doing for time, so.
Oh, very good. You're like, you still have 4 minutes. You want to keep going?
I got nothing. I'll tap out. Unless anyone has questions, I'd be happy to answer some questions.
Did we lose Britta?
No, I'm here. I was curious what teams could be doing. Like, do you want people watching for these organisms as they're out for hikes and learning about things, or what?
Yeah, absolutely.
How can we be helpful?
It's kind of funny because not only here in Massachusetts, but everywhere, we get tipped off by the public much more often because our outfits are so small. The Forest Health Program, we have sawyers, we have people doing the cutting, but as far as the researchers and the people collecting information and data, there are only, what, 5 of us, Felicia?
Yeah.
There are like 5 of us. Like, we just got a new guy to bring us up to 5 people. So the majority of what we find is from the public tipping us off, and then we're the ones that, so they kind of tell us something doesn't seem right, and then we go out and we're able, being the specialists, we're able to kind of determine what they're seeing, and that tips off the whole investigation and the mitigation efforts that we're going to undertake to try and deal with the problems.
Cool, thank you. My other question that I like to ask everybody is, could you talk a little bit about how you got to be a forest health specialist? Like, what did you study in undergrad? Why'd you get excited about this fun and exciting little creepy crawly?
Yeah, actually, I can't stand bugs. I think they're disgusting. They're weird, but I love forestry. I love water and I love trees. So I love protecting natural resources. I actually went to Worcester State for a geography and geology degree. So it has nothing to do with this, but the Davy Tree Company was hiring en masse when Asian Longhorned Beetle was first an issue. So basically you just jump at opportunities, you get in, and then you kind of realize like, wow, I really have a passion for this. So a lot of us studied to become certified arborists, and then you're studying silviculture, and a lot of it you just kind of do on your own. And what was really good about the Asian Longhorn Beetle program is it's a collaborative effort. You work with like 100 people in one office, and everyone's got expertise in a different area. So a lot of us were teaching each other things every day. It was a great springboard to just learn a lot about forestry in general. And then so it's a mixture of educating yourself and then just being nice to people. So when those interviews come up, you can be smart, and you could, do a little bit of networking too, and try your best to get to know other professionals in the field. And again, just everyone knows something that you don't know, and you can learn from anybody.
Yeah.
Cool, thanks. Did you think of any questions, Felicia, you want to ask him?
No, I'm too close to it. My head's in
that
the
was
weeds.
or the trees at any rate. That was a
Yes.
very, very thorough overview. Thank you so much, Eric, for doing this for us.
Absolutely. Happy to do it. Thank you.
I really appreciate this, Eric.
Well, a lot of it was your slideshow, so I just kind of doctored some stuff up. So I appreciate the help.
You don't have to tell people it's mine. I'm okay. I don't get territorial.